Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for listening. Just a quick heads up. This episode was recorded before the WGA struck a deal with the AMPTP, and before we went back to the table with the AMPTP, we make a few mentions to AI as it relates to the WGA. However, everything is perfectly up to date with regards to our own needs and what is at stake for our own union and our own contract. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody. I'm Audrey Moore with the Audrey Helps Actors podcast, and today we have
Zeke Alton.
Hi, Zeke. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I'm absolutely thrilled. First of all, I wanted to tell you thank you for your service. I know that you were a veteran.
Thank you.
And also, thank you for your service to this union, to our membership, and all that you have done. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the union. Are you a part of the negotiating committee? How did you get involved? All of that good stuff.
I have been a professional actor in the union since about 2016. That was when I was winding down my 20-year career as a military officer.
Mm-hmm.
I've been living in LA full time since 2019, and when I got here, I had retired from the military, but my previous job in the military had to do with national security strategy, and as a test pilot, I was an acquisitions officer, so I spent a lot of time negotiating contracts and managing contracts for the military. You know, as Liam Neeson said, I had a particular set of skills that turned out to be quite useful in union service, and some good friends introduced me to union service, and so I volunteer on multiple committees at the union. I was formerly on the LA local board, and right now I'm also sitting on the negotiating committees for the TV theatrical contract, which we are currently striking, and the interactive contract, which we have been negotiating for just over a year.
What I love about what you just said is I'm kind of nerding out about how overqualified you are for all of this, which is very exciting. And we are really lucky to have you. And part of what's been fun is I've been interviewing people about individual lines on the sort of spreadsheet that we were given of each point that we went in to negotiate it, right? So the grid that we were given is how awesome and smart and qualified and unique everyone is for the positions in which they're holding to show up and participate in these negotiations. So I really love all of the experience and the perspective of all of the experience that you're coming in with. I actually have a name for people who enter show business as a second career. I call those second act actors. And so these are people who is their second career. And I love second act actors so much because you have so much that you're bringing to the table, and also, the energy around the pursuit of being an actor is usually much more calm because you understand, like, it takes a while to build a career. It takes a while to earn mastery and expertise. And because you've done that with one field already, you don't have what can sometimes happen to younger actors who are coming out of school, which is this, like, feeling like it has to happen or have happened already.
Well, thank you for saying that. I do think it's important, you know, when you come from another profession and you understand that you treat your day-to-day work as a trade and a profession. It took me many, many years to call myself a pilot. It took me more years to be able to call myself a test pilot. And it took me many more years beyond that to call myself any good at it. And so I think you're, as you call them, second act actors, which I love, you realize that this is a constant thing where you are constantly learning. And you don't just walk in the room and kill everything. You learn to treat this like a profession and do the 8 to 10 to 12 hours of work every single day to be the best at what you can do.
I brought you on today to talk specifically about artificial intelligence. I'm having people on to just talk individually about items on the grid, and people can find the grid on my Instagram. We'll also post a link here in the show notes. But you specifically are coming on to talk about artificial intelligence. And so the union, us, the membership, the negotiating committee, went to the AMPTP, these corporations, and asked for proposals regarding AI and AI protections. And I'd like to get an understanding from you of what was asked for, why it was asked for, and what was countered, if anything.
This is a complicated subject, so I'll start out really wide and then narrow in.
Great.
Before we start talking about numbers of how much people get paid, you have to talk about the basic concepts and structure of how technology is used.
Mm.
There is a recognition on our part as the union that this is Pandora's box and it is open and you can't shut it. The technology is here. It is going to be
Mm-hmm.
used as it matures, and it's maturing exponentially. In some ways, it will democratize the use of this,
Hmm.
and you're not going to be able to get away with it. So rather than try to fight the technology, we're concerned with capturing the rights within our contract, if that makes sense. There's two pieces here. There's machine learning, the concept of machine learning, and then there's the concept of digital models or digital replicas. So when we talk about machine learning and digital replicas, we want three things from each, but they're a little different. So with respect to machine learning, that is the large foundational models that replicas are based on, like the GPT that ChatGPT is based on. And it crawls the web and it ingests everything. Fair use, copyright, these open systems take in everything. And they're using everything that we've done in the past to create derivative works for the future. And so we feel that transparency, consent, and compensation are important. Transparency about what these models are chewing up and taking in, the ability for the performers in the union to consent to that happening for our voices and likenesses, and some level of compensation. So we have to agree on those basic tenets before we start talking numbers.
And are they agreeing on those basic tenets so far?
Oh no,
Okay, great.
they are
Yeah, I didn't
not.
think that they would.
They are not interested in giving any transparency. They
Mm-hmm.
believe that they should be able to gain consent initially for use in perpetuity. And they don't believe that compensation is required because they feel that they own the work and it's theirs to do with as they please.
And will you just really quickly, for people who don't know, explain what the in perpetuity means?
Forever and ever, amen.
That's right.
Now, there's some back and forth here, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
this is where we negotiate, right? Do you consent? Say we're talking about, well, let me get into this when we talk about replicas, because that's just machine learning. That's feeding the machine to make it smarter.
Yes. Okay, great.
When you talk about building replicas, we want the same thing, right? We want transparency, because if you have Audrey that can then go do a performance either
Mm-hmm.
vocally or even visually, right? You need to be able to see what Audrey is generating. And then you need to be able to consent to that being okay, the amount that's generated and the content that's generated, because your voice and likeness is your brand. And there should be some level of compensation for the amount or type that is generated.
Is that singularly just an Audrey, or does that include the use of artificial intelligence to completely change my performance so that it is no longer what Audrey would do in the role, but using artificial intelligence to take my voice and likeness and make it do the thing that they want it to do in the role?
Well, there's two pieces of that. So there are AI tools that can alter your performance. That's one piece.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to put some boundaries around that with consent and compensation and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the model that can create new cloth performance with you never being there in the first place. And so we have to handle both of those, because you as an artist, you give a performance with intent. Are we willing to give over your intent to an editor or a director to change your eye line, to add tears to your face, to change the tone of your voice so that it went from sad to regretful?
Mm-hmm.
Are we willing to give that control over? Converse, or even
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, for full new cloth performances, are you willing to work on a movie and then have your replica do the sequel with no knowledge of where that character arc goes and no control over the performance that your brand will be based on in the future?
And so, to summarize so far, the cat's out of the bag. We're not going to get the toothpaste back in the tube. It's done. So we're not qualified or capable to stop it. So then it's about managing it and capitalizing on it so that there are regulations in place and also compensation models that are fair and bargained and agreed upon as fair with regards to both using our likeness to create more of itself, like you said, the computing part of it, and then using our likeness and changing our performances in some editor way, and then using our likeness to create whole new performances out of the computer air, I guess you could say, right? We call it in our house, we call it the internets, right? Out of the internets.
All the internets.
And all of the internets. And in so doing, we lose control over all of their performances, and they're using our likeness for them to continue to make money. Now, it would be great for them, and let's just acknowledge this. It would be outstanding for them in a probably short-term way. We can make arguments about a long-term, but a short-term way for them to just own everybody's likeness and just do whatever the hell they want and just have a bunch of people at a computer crafting, creating stories so that they don't have to deal with actors and their humanity and needing sleep and needing pay and needing food today and negotiating contracts. Like, if they could just not deal with any of the humanity aspect of our labor, that would be just great for them in the short term, because then they wouldn't have to pay for any of those things.
Correct.
And so we're saying, no, we got to have like a serious conversation about it. So tell me what you guys did in terms of coming in and asking. What was the ask when you went in?
The ask was just that: transparency, consent, and compensation. And it is not for us contractually to tell a business how to do their job from a technical perspective, but it is our business to say what the rights are and that they must be paid for, and then we work on the structure for how to do that. We're still at step one, getting the respect of, yes, you should have transparency. Yes, we should get consent at proper times. And yes, we should pay you something. We're not at the what do we pay you yet.
Yes. And so what was their response then? Did they counter at all, or did they say, go fuck yourself?
We went with the latter for our first few rounds.
Okay, great.
I would say thanks to the WGA and their standing strong, and our president being very, very forthright and upfront about what our priorities were, they realized that we were not going to go anywhere until we had a conversation. And so the conversation began. Most of our conversations happen off the record, but it is very difficult to discuss these types of things with lawyers who are not producers of the thing. We hear a lot in the press that it's us against the producers, which is a bit of a red herring,
not real.
right?
Yeah, right. No, that's not real.
The producers and us both realize that we create things, but we are all beholden to executives who own the money strings, who are looking, as you said, for a short-term way to make money. And we need to help them realize that in the long term, not only will you lose the humanity in the art, but it's very, very difficult to go back, because actors don't pop up out of nowhere. As we said it at the beginning, it's a profession, and you have to grow an actor, and they have to get good. You can't just pluck somebody out and make them a Marvel lead or, the next great Avatar movie if you want it to be good.
And I was going to say one thing that I'd like your opinion on, and I'd like to discuss, because it's being discussed in various podcasts about our industry and artificial intelligence, is a concept called ethical AI. So that is artificial intelligence where the input of what is being used to grab information, so what source codes are being used to grab information, that is trackable, so that people can say, hey, you took my shit to make your shit, and so you got to pay me some shit, right? And that is doable. It is currently there. They can use it. They can do it for our industry, and that it's also in the best interest of the studios, because protecting their own IP, if we think of an actor as Audrey, I'm my own IP, and my voice and likeness is my own intellectual property, right? And so if they want to use my voice and likeness, then they've got to pay me for it. And the same is true for their content, that if they want to use if somebody wants to take their products and use it as information, their stories, somebody wants to take The Jungle Book by Disney and turn it into a different version of the same thing and generate scripts and generate content through artificial intelligence, then that's a problem for Disney. that's a problem for these companies as adversaries, right? Is stealing each other's shit without payment. So what do you think about that? What do you know or think about any of that?
So the soundbite for that is if it's fair use, it's fair use for everyone. In which case, I can then take the tool and make my own Mickey Mouse movie and just say that it was fair use because I taught my machine on Mickey Mouse. So
Yes.
you're right. We need to get them to understand that we're in partnership here. And when they try to protect themselves, it behooves them to protect us. There are a few issues that we currently have as performers, and that is, unfortunately, our voices and likenesses are not necessarily ours as intellectual property. But all I have to do is adjust the timbre of your voice, and it's no longer you. It's transformative.
By 10%. Yeah.
One of the things that SAG-AFTRA is doing legislatively outside of contracts is pushing for a federal right of publicity in IP in voice and likeness, because right now it's state by state. And there are a lot of different rules. For example, in some states, if you die, your voice and likeness becomes fair use. In California, it is what's called descendable, which means when you die, it moves into your estate. But California and New York have the strongest right of publicity laws. But there are issues even in California in that right of publicity protects against commercialization, but not expressive works. So advertising is different than film and TV.
It is, yeah.
So our push for a federal right of publicity is really looking for coverage of expressive works for anyone who is in the profession of performance. And that is the bedrock. It can't do anything by itself. On top of that, there is a requirement contractually to get, as I said, that transparency, consent, and compensation in order to make that property right worth something to us.
Right.
And in turn, allow the companies to protect their own IP. So that this all just doesn't run away from itself.
Right. I mean, that's what it has a tendency to do. And so one of the arguments that I always hear from literally everybody when we talk about this is what is challenging about technology and artificial intelligence is that even if we as a country decide, you know what, we're going to slow our roll on this artificial intelligence thing. We're going to chill it out. This is going nutso bonkers. We need to take it down a notch. Then it's always like, well, but China, well, but Russia. And so there's this feeling like even if we ourselves put boundaries around things, that there is a country out there that may not put those boundaries, and then our likeness is out there. So what are your thoughts about that?
A little bit twofold. There's always the argument you hear on Capitol Hill about how we can't suppress innovation. And that is usually an argument made by large corporations in order for them to actually make money. It's not really about innovation. It's to make money. And it always comes at the expense of the labor force. As a 20-year military veteran who has worked in national security strategy, I cannot remember how many times I've heard the but China, but Russia argument. And there is an answer to that. There's an answer in the analogy of the IAEA, if you're familiar with that governing body.
I'm not.
It is the global governing body that essentially controls and regulates nuclear power and energy. Because we realized when nuclear power came about that but China and but Russia, we had to stay ahead. So there's a global governing body that sort of keeps that in line. I believe, and this is my personal opinion, that AI is a technology on the order of the atomic bomb.
I agree. And I'm so glad we can have that conversation. It feels that big to me. Like when it happened, when it became public, when my husband and I started messing around with it in our own houses, right? In our own computers.
Your own internets.
Our own internets. It did feel that way. It felt like, it felt atomic bomb level in terms of capability and responsibility to what it can do.
Yeah, and so at least I am optimistic because they are the congressional and Senate hearings are talking about this, the need for world regulation of this technology, because we know how this works. Corporations offshore to get it done as cheap as possible and use innovation to make money at the expense of everything else.
Yeah.
And that could be catastrophic globally with the amount of worker displacement. You know, people always ask, why should they care about the SAG-AFTRA strike? And I tell them it's because we are the canary in the coal mine. The WGA, the writers and the actors, are having this very public fight about what's going to happen to everyone else: CPAs, paralegals, radiology techs, UPMs.
Yes.
And so everyone needs to pay attention, because as this goes, everything else goes.
Yes, that's right. The degree to which our governing body as a union, as unions, right, as a very public union, like every single industry wants famous people to put their face on something, right? Every single one is like, can I get a famous person to put their face on my cause? And so here we have a cause, and we have all of the faces are like, hey, this is a cause we've got to wake up to. And it doesn't seem to be politically motivated. It seems to be like literally every single person, no matter how they're leaning, is like, ruh-roh, this seems dangerous for humanity. And that feels correct. So in terms of going forward, what, with all of your knowledge and expertise, just so everyone knows, every time I told anyone I was interviewing Zeke, everyone was like, oh God, I love Zeke. And they're like, he knows so much about AI. And I was like, oh, great. Is there anything with regard to AI? And I know you may not be able to talk about it because of negotiating blackouts of information. Is there anything that you can or feel comfortable saying, like, it would be great if through this negotiation we got blah, blah, blah for AI in terms of protections or compensation or transparency?
For me personally, the most important, the linchpin of this is transparency.
Okay.
If Zeke is out there doing voice performance, and I can't see what is generated out of Zeke, I have no way to consent and no way to determine what my compensation is. And our past practice in the union at relying on voluntary disclosure of usage is made 1,000,000 times worse, because in the past, I was always able to have the opportunity to say, I won't say that, or to know exactly how many things that I said. When Zeke is out there, I don't know what it's saying, and I don't know how much is being said, so I can't consent. And I can't get the proper compensation unless I have full transparency. We cannot make the mistake we made in streaming by allowing corporations to hide the data, because that simple act of hiding the data ends our career.
Oof. I feel like I'm giving spirit fingers to everyone. It's visual. So spirit fingers.
I do have to qualify. I'm not an AI expert. I'm not a computer scientist.
I understand.
I am an engineer, and I have lived with technology my whole life, and I also very deeply understand contracts and negotiations. But I would urge everybody to recognize that you can no longer just be the actor. Yeah. You've really got to learn your business, and you can start by just starting to read your contracts. Read them every night. It's a great way to go to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And let me ask you this also. Is there a place or a way or a resource for actors to learn how to use artificial intelligence for their own benefit? Because one of the things that I also think that studios and creatives should be aware of is that if they can use the technology, we can too. And so what is to stop an actor from, in a self-tape, in a matter of a few minutes of editing, change our performance, blend our own voices, change the vocal tone, add a tear, do anything like that to our self-tapes in a way that they cannot verify whether or not that performance was accessible and came out of me, the actor?
It's everywhere. People are not really aware of how much it is everywhere. A simple Google search showed me a basic program where I could take my headshot and turn it into a digital avatar. And then I used a second simple program to animate that digital avatar to use a cloned version of my voice to say things. It took me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I would say that we as performers need to start to fuck around with these tools. Understand the end user license you're signing, for one.
Yep.
Get used to this technology because it is here, and understand that because we are all filmmakers, this put in the creative's hands can make everything more efficient and everything better. What we're fighting for is it to be in the creative's hands so that writers can get through writer's block and journalists can get draft articles out and so on and so forth, rather than in executive hands who just replace the labor force.
That's so true.
So use it, try it out, and get to know it.
Mm-hmm.
And it does all the things, pretty much all the things that you can imagine somebody has built a model on top of a foundation to do using this technology.
Yeah, that's why it feels atomic bomb level to me, is it does all of the things and fast.
Part of what the union does is it tracks not just contracts, but also technology and legislation. And right now there's a House bill introduced called the AI Disclosure Act that would require anything that comes out of a generative AI to be labeled as such for protection of consumers and people in general and your own personal privacy and your identity.
And safety.
And so with something like that, it allows us to look at something and appreciate what is human and be able to differentiate what is human from what is computer generated. At least we're all on the same side. Even our self-serving politicians understand that an inability to know what's real hurts them.
Right.
It kills a democracy. And so when our self-serving politicians' self-servingness serves us, that's when we're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we're going to win. I'm optimistic about that.
Well, this has been wonderful. Your reputation is well earned. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for coming on today.